So when you're adding fractions, positive and negative integers like this, let's say it's 18, you would do biggest integer wins the sign, and so 18 is my biggest integer. My answer would be negative, and I have a negative and a negative, so I would just add these together, and I would get negative 33. Okay, so that's easy. But when you're multiplying, we have two things that we need to do. So say I had this, it's negative 2 times 3. I have an odd number of negative numbers, so if it's odd, it's negative. If it's even, like this, there's 2 negative numbers, my answer would be positive. And then we would just go ahead and do the math. So for this one, I know that my answer is negative, and then 3 times 2 is 6. This one, I have an even number, so 3 times 2 is 6, and it's a positive 6. Does that make sense to you? Okay. Now, division is the same thing. So if I had 30 divided by 3, that would be 10. If I had negative 30 divided by 3, that would be 10 as well, but I have an odd number of negative signs, so it would be negative. And if I had negative 30 divided by negative 3, I have an even number of negative signs, so my answer would be positive 10. So that's all great. And then sometimes they're going to actually put exponents as negatives. So there's 3 ways that it could go. It could go like this. It could go like this, with this being in the parentheses, or it could go like this, with the negative sign being outside of the parentheses. So let's take it piece by piece. What this means is that the 3 is cubed, and it does not include the negative sign. So we're going to figure out what it is. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. And then this negative sign is always going to be in the answer because it is outside. It's not the thing getting cubed. So it's always negative. This one means negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. And what this means is that the negative follows inside the parentheses, and it is to the 3rd power or cubed. So now we ask, is it even or odd? This is odd number of negative signs. So my answer is going to be negative, and then it's going to be 27. This means 3 times 3 times 3. The only thing that's cubed is this right here. And my negative is also going to follow in the answer. So this is going to be negative, and then 3 cubed is 27. So they are all the same, but they won't always be all the same. So for example, if I did negative 4 cubed, negative 4 cubed, and negative 4 cubed, that may or may not be the same answer. So it just depends. This one, yeah, we just see it differently. We take each one as a separate thing and we figure it out. So for this one, the only thing that's getting cubed right here is the 4. For this one, it's just the 4, and for this one, it's a negative 4. So this answer is 100% going to be negative no matter what. This is always going to be negative no matter what. And then this, we'd have to ask, is it an even number of negative signs or an odd number? So let's take this one. This one is 16, this one is 16, and this one is 16. But let's see whether they're positive or negative. So this one goes here, so it's negative 16. this one goes here, so it's negative 16. And then this one is negative 4 times negative 4. I have an even number of negative signs, so my answer would be positive.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay, now there's something else that they're going to add to it, or that they might add to it, and that is can you see that? Okay, so they might add, like right here, this is 4n cubed times m. So they're telling you what n is, and they're telling you what m is. So whatever n is going to be the thing that is cubed. So let's start from the beginning. So right here, I'm going to say, first I have to figure out if my answer is positive or negative, and since I'm multiplying, it has nothing to do with the biggest integer anymore. That's just adding and subtracting. When we're multiplying, we ask the question, is there an even number of negative signs, or is there an odd number of negative signs? So for this one, I have an odd number. There's only one negative sign. So the answer is going to be negative, and then you just do 3 times 5 like normal. So it's negative 15. This one is 5 times negative 3. So we're going to ask our two questions. Is there an even or odd number? It's odd. And then you ask, what's 5 times 3? So this one is also negative 15. This one is 3 times 5. There's no negative sign, so my answer is positive. And then this one is negative 3 times negative 5. So for this one, we have an even number of negative signs. So my answer is going to be positive. And then I'm going to do 3 times 5 is 15. So this one is positive 15. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So for homework, you're going to do, these are easy, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. They're easy though. For this, you're going to, basically, it's going to be 9 over 1 times negative 5 over 18. And then you just multiply across for the numerators, and you multiply across for the denominators. So even though it's a fraction, it's totally fine. You would just do that. Okay.
Why do I have to multiply?
Because
never mind.
Yeah. Okay.
Why do I have to do cross?
Say it again.
Why do I have to do cross multiplication?
You could. So to simplify a fraction, so suppose I had 9 over 1 times negative 5 over 18. So remember how we did, this is cross cancellation, right? So it's not cross multiplication, it's cross cancellation. So you can do it one of two ways. You can multiply across. So if I did that, it would be 9 over 1 times 5 over 18, and this is negative. So you could do 45 over 18, and I have one negative sign, that's odd, so my answer is going to be negative 45 over 18. Now, in 7th and 8th grade, most of the time, they let you use a calculator, so you would just do 45 divided by 18, and it's negative 2.5. If you want to do cross cancellation, these two numbers go together, and these two numbers go together. So it's going to simplify this fraction. So what does 9 and 18 have in common? A 9, right?
9 times 2.
Yep, so I'm going to trade this for a 2, and this is going to become a 1. And now I have a pretty easy fraction. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 2 is 2. And I know that my answer is negative because I have an odd number of negative signs. And then to simplify that, we would say 2 goes into 5 how many times? 2. What's left over? The remainder is 1. And then my denominator is 2. And my answer is negative, and that's the same thing, right? So negative 2.5 is the same as negative 2.5. So you can figure out either way is 100% fine. Okay, so for these ones, first what you're going to do is you are going to see that there's a key up here. M equals negative 4, N equals 3, and P equals negative 1. So what they're saying for this one is M times N, and you're going to plug in negative 4 times 3, and then you're going to do, I have an odd number of negative signs, so my answer is going to be negative, and then 4 times 3 is 12. So for homework, you can try all of these. The important thing to remember is that this negative sign that's out here is only going with this part right here. It's different than an exponent. So for this one, say I had negative M times N, and say my M equals 2 and my N equals 6. This, let's make this negative. This right here is negative M. So negative M is negative 2 times N. And we know that when something is touching like this, it becomes a positive. And then my N is a 6. It's kind of tricky. It definitely takes practice, but does that make sense to you, kind of?
Yeah, it does now, but I don't think I'll remember it. But, I mean, I'm going to be rewatching the video, so I'll be fine.
Yeah, and then say that we were doing negative M times N, and M was 2, and N was 6. Then I would do negative 2 times 6, and there's an odd number of negatives, so this would be negative 12. This was positive 12 because my M was a negative. This one, my M is a positive. So yeah, just kind of work with it. These are tricky, so you just have to kind of practice and get them wrong and then redo them, and just kind of, they're kind of tricky. So you're going to do 13 to 24 for homework. And then for this one, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to plug in the number. So they tell you X is negative 12 and Y is 4. So you're going to do 25 to 30. And then you're going to do 32 to 39. But these are pretty quick. They're not necessarily easy. You have to be careful and you have to think about it. But they don't take a ton of time. So let me go over examples that I haven't gone over yet. So something like this. We know that whatever's in the parentheses is going to get put higher by this amount. So we're going to forget about this because we're going to deal with the exponents first. And we're going to do negative 4 times negative 4. Because it's squared. We have an even number of negatives, so my answer is going to be positive for this, and then I multiply it by 2. So it's going to be 32. You might have something that looks like this. So for this one, we're going to first deal with this. This is negative 4 times negative 4, which is 16. I have an even number of negative signs, so my answer is positive. And then now I'm going to deal with what's outside of the parentheses. And this, if you can remember, negative 4 squared, this is the only thing getting squared, so it's 16. And my negative sign always follows this type of problem. So it's basically negative 16 times negative 16, and we would just do that on the calculator if we can. If not, we would do it by hand. So it's 256, And now our next thing that we have to wonder about is there an odd or an even amount of negative signs? So there's an odd. So the answer is negative. So it's just a lot to manage, but it's not hard. You just have to take it step by step. So that's the good thing. That's your homework. And then I'm going to go on to the next concept, but I won't give you homework for that. Okay, so for this one, they're saying the problem is 3/4 W minus 7. And they're telling me that W equals 1 1/3. So I'm going to do 3/4 times 1 1/3 minus 7. It looks crazy, but it's not. We're just going to do one piece at a time. So the first thing is I'm going to put this into an improper fraction because that's going to be easy for me to deal with. So 3 times 1 is 3 plus 1 is 4 over 3 times 3 times 4. So I'm going to multiply those together. And once I get that answer, I'm going to subtract that whole thing by 7. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So I'm going to multiply across. 3 times 4 is 12 over 12 minus 7. That looks crazy, but all it really means is 1 minus 7.
Mm-hmm.
And then I say biggest integer wins the sign. It's a 7, so my answer is negative. 7 minus 1 is 6, so it's negative 6. It looks all kinds of crazy, but
It doesn't, I mean, it does in the beginning, but when you get to the 3/4 times 4/3, then it's fine.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy.
Pretty easy. Okay, so let's look at this right here. When you're dividing positive and negatives, it might look like this, but it also might look like this. It's the same exact thing. This means division, this means division. So same thing, we just say I have an odd number of negatives, so my answer is going to be negative, and then 6 divided by 3 is 2. Same thing with this. If I had something that looked like this, it looks crazy, but it's not. So first what we do is we say 3 minus 14. Biggest integer wins the sign, so my answer up here is going to be negative. And then 14 minus 3, because I have a positive here and a negative here, is 11 over negative 2. Now I'm dividing, but I have an even number of negative signs, so my answer is going to be positive. And then if I did 11 divided by 2, my answer would be 5.5. So it's positive 5.5. Okay, for this one, we might have something that has a combination of negatives, fractions, exponents, whatever they throw at us. That's okay, we can handle. So sorry, this doesn't look clear, but it's a negative 4. So we're first going to deal with our exponents because PEMDAS tells us that we have to do that. PEMDAS is parentheses, but this really isn't a parentheses. It's nothing to be solved. It's just a parentheses because we can't write it like this, because we can't have a negative next to a division sign because it might be misread as 2 cubed divided by minus 4. So that's the only reason why. It's not truly a parentheses. It's just holding that negative sign with the 4. So that's why we don't do the parentheses first. It's not technically parentheses. Something that's technically parentheses has to be solved inside. So this is 2 times 2 times 2. So that's 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8 divided by negative 4. Now it becomes a pretty easy problem. 8 divided by 4 is 2, and I have an odd number of negative signs, so it's negative 2. Does that make sense to you, Sienna?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I might have something that looks like this. Negative 56 divided by 4 plus 3. So now this is a PEMDAS. These are parentheses because something has to be done inside the parentheses. So I'm first going to solve that. 4 plus 3 is 7. And now I have just a plain old division problem. So I have an odd number of negative signs. So my answer is going to be negative. And then 56 divided by 7 is 8. So it's negative 8. Okay, y plus 3x divided by y. So I'm actually going to have you do this. And x equals negative 2, y equals 3, and z equals 3.5. So you're going to write all that out, and you're going to do that.
We can't really see it.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
What were you doing now?
Yeah.